Good evening, all the participants. We will begin today with our day two of workshop of research methodology. I would like to invite Dr. Mugdha Ambedkar to start with the session. Thank you.
Should I start?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So, good afternoon to everybody. Thank you for joining in this meeting. In today's session, we'll be discussing finding journals and avoiding plagiarism. Now, for both these things, there are tools available online, both free and paid. We'll mainly be focusing on the free tools that are available online. So, here's an overview of what we'll be discussing in today's session. First is searching for journals by using a free online tool, introduction to plagiarism, checking your manuscript for plagiarism by using free online tools, avoiding plagiarism by paraphrasing text, and we'll be looking at one example of paraphrasing text. So, yeah. So whenever you have to, after you've written your article, say you've written a manuscript for an original article, here are some tips that you can use to search for your journal. Now, you may or may not be using an online tool for this, but even if you are not using an online tool, these tips will definitely be handy. First of all, you must always start searching for your journal, target journal, only after the first draft of your manuscript is ready. That means your manuscript has to have some definite form before you start looking for a suitable journal. So wait until the first draft of your manuscript is ready and only then start looking out for suitable journals. Then the first place to look for suitable journals would be the list of references for your own manuscript. Remember that you would have referred to a lot of papers that are either very similar to your paper or then closely related to your paper. And the logic behind this is that similar manuscripts can be published in the same journal, which is why this is the best place to start looking. It's a whole list of potentially useful journals. You must use this advantage. Finally, you can take suggestions from mentors or colleagues who have recently published their work. The key word here is recently because trends in publication keep changing. So you can always depend on somebody who's recently published their work to give you the latest or pretty much the latest trend in publishing, or maybe what is required of you, or maybe formats of images that are now more easily acceptable than they were earlier. So it's always better to talk to people who have recently published their work. You may have heard of Biomed Central. Biomed Central is a UK based publishing house and they have very many journals that they currently publish. Most of their journals are open access and freely available online. Obviously the charges involved for publication in BMC or Biomed Central journals is high, but they have shared some insightful tips about how you go about looking for the right journal. So an important statement that Biomed Central makes is that when you select the right journal, your chances of getting accepted increase considerably. Now this is absolutely right. It's like finding the right match or the right audience for your work, which is why you are expected to invest time and effort in searching for the right journal. Like I've told you before, even Biomed Central is of the opinion that you should start with journals you have read, which would mean you should look at your reference list. Next is select a journal with a wide readership across disciplines if your manuscript is on an interdisciplinary topic. Now, I could probably give you an example of this. My own PhD work was on wastewater treatment, and for some reason, in countries outside India, wastewater treatment is almost exclusively dealt with by chemical engineers. So whenever I had to publish my work about some process, my work was on enzymatic treatment of wastewater, but because it was considered a treatment of wastewater, I have often been asked to publish my work in journals that are read not only by biologists but also by people from environmental engineering and chemical engineering backgrounds. So it has always helped me if I choose a journal which is read by maybe environmental engineers and chemical engineers, because the number of citations definitely goes up when people from different backgrounds are reading your work and citing your work in their research. So if you have an interdisciplinary topic in your manuscript, it works for you to choose a journal which has a wide readership across disciplines. Impact factor. Now, impact factor, like we saw yesterday, a lot of people talk about impact factor being one of the most easily available indices of a journal's quality. But I'd like to emphasize here that it is simply one of many indicators, and today we'll see how it is calculated. Essentially, you'll find out that impact factors are probably are an index, but not a very good index of a journal's quality, because there are so many variables that are involved in calculating the impact factor. For example, you'll have to see whether the journal is simply an online journal or whether it is also a print journal, what study area it is in, because pharmacy journals tend to have a lot of a very high impact factor, because it's a very active field of research and people are constantly publishing and citing, and accordingly the impact factor of those journals increases. So I'll emphasize once again that impact factor is simply one of many indicators of a journal's quality. It is definitely not the most reliable one. When you are searching for your journals, even Biomed Central has the same opinion, that you must prioritize what you think is the best publication time for you. Different journals have different times, in the sense that they would take different durations to review your paper and to convey the review result to you. And it you have to see whether you need a publication rapidly, whether it's deadline bound, whether your promotion depends on it, or whether your funding depends on it. Accordingly, you must select a journal that gives you the shortest review time if you need urgent publication. Another thing you need to check is publication charges, because open access journals are, no doubt, it's the new trend, and it is how most journals are going, the way most journals are going, they're going open access now. That because the charges are really high, you need to think twice whether you can seriously afford to invest that much money in a single article, or whether it's going to give you returns of that measure. So publication charges is another factor based on which you can decide whether to publish in a specific journal or not. Another thing you need to see is whether the journal's website gives you all the information you need. So you need to visit the website of the journal and read about the journal, maybe see what their editorial board is, find out what their readership is, how long have they been around, how many times a year they publish. It's all information that is useful to you to make a decision. Perhaps you, if something, if the journal publishes issues thrice a year and you think you need to publish faster, then you would probably go for something that publishes 6 times a year. It's like that. The frequency of publication may matter to you at some point. Author guidelines have to be followed, read and followed before you submit the manuscript, so there is definitely no way out of that. And another thing is that you need to, I told you this yesterday also, selecting a single journal is probably the worst thing you can do to yourself and to your manuscript. So always select at least 3 journals, so that in case the first choice that you've made rejects your journal, rejects your paper on whatever count, you always have something else to go back to. Okay, so now let's look at free online journal finding tools. Now, the best way to describe a journal finding tool, I was trying to look for a parallel, and maybe for want of a better parallel, I stumbled upon this. I figured that it's like shadi.com, but for your manuscript. So, you have to put in whatever filters you need, or whatever it is that you want to state as absolutely essential clauses before you decide to publish there. So these tools are made available by a lot of big publishing houses. So some of the most prominent journal publishers have provided free tools, and they ask you to probably upload your title and and your manuscript abstract, maybe some keywords, so that they can suggest from among their own journals which is the most suitable for you. We can try and take an example of this. I'll show you Elsevier's Journal Finder. Okay. So Elsevier's Journal Finder, if you can see, it's you have to enter the title and abstract of your paper, and you can find journals that are best suited to your manuscript. I have a manuscript here, and I can just paste the title. I'm pasting the abstract. Usually you need at least 100 words of your abstract. I'm sorry, 100, so that the journal finder can suggest the most suitable journal for your manuscript. So these are all the options that they have given me. If you notice here, in the results, they have shown me how well the journal matches my manuscript. So they assign a score to the results that are displayed. Oh dear. So if you notice, because I was looking at volatile compounds from a plant, I've got results such as this Journal of Applied Research on Medicinal and Aromatic Plants and similar. They even tell you sometimes what keywords are, the best match for your keywords, etc. Okay. So Elsevier has this journal finder. You'll find that a lot of the names are similar: journal suggester, journal finder. But the key issue here is that you are expected to put your data, and they will give you from their database the closest matching journal from among what they publish, their own journals basically. Web of Science also has a similar manuscript matching, we could call it a sort of facility. And the advantage of going to Web of Science rather than going to any of those big names in publishing is that, first of all, Web of Science gives you options that are journals from various publication houses, and so you would probably have different styles, and your style may match one publication house more closely than the other. So you are free to go with that journal without having to search in its publication list before you check there. So they also, this using Web of Science also introduces you to a lot of new journals or journals which are relatively less known than the big names like Elsevier journals or Springer journals or maybe Wiley or Taylor and Francis. There are smaller publishing houses which still have fairly good journals, and these show up if they are listed in the Web of Science, then they show up in this manuscript matching search. And because they are listed in the Web of Science, you can be pretty sure that they are not predatory journals and that they have a fairly good quality. So publishing your manuscript there is not going to be risky in any way. Let's now look at Web of Science's manuscript matching. So if you already have a manuscript, you can find a match. I believe I'll have to log in. Okay. So they expect you to log in, and now I can add my title here and abstract. And let's see what they give us. So here it's more clearly visible the match score, and they've also listed which keywords from my set of keywords or from my abstract have been found to match with the journal's keywords, and to what extent they match also. So the number of options I get here are very many more than I would get under every single publishing house's own journal finding tool. So I would recommend that you go for Web of Science as a journal finding tool rather than approaching any single publishing house like maybe Elsevier or Springer. You're bound to get better results. So, like we saw, whichever journal finding tool you may be using, there are some basic things that you need to add in each and every case. You'll have to upload your title, you'll have to paste your abstract at least 100 words, and some journal tools ask you for keywords, some don't, some take them out of your abstract. Now, in every case, whether the score is displayed or not, every search result is assigned a match score, and that will tell you how compatible your manuscript is with the suggested journal. Now, obviously, you can apply filters. You may want journals of a certain impact factor, or you may be uh, s- quite particular about what fee you would like to pay. Now, there is also a journal quality index called Cite Score. Not very reliable, but it's like the number of citations, etc. You may want to have review time of a particular duration. You may not want an acceptance rate lower than maybe 10%, and those are additional filters which you will be able to add into your search later. You can see this probably in Elsevier has that refine your search thing. You find it somewhere below. You could refine your search by adding filters here. So, but the thing to remember is that every time you add a filter, you are less and less likely to get journals of your choice. As in, your choice will definitely reduce as soon as you add filters, and the more filters you add, uh, the less chances are that you would get a journal of your choice. So your number of options go down as soon as you start adding filters. There is also this tool, I think you can call it a tool. It's called Country of Papers. And this tool specifically allows you to compare journals based on their open access fees or publication fees, which are also called article processing charges. Now, article processing charges or publication fee, or in general, even open access fees, this data is not necessarily displayed very easily on the website. You generally have to go digging and looking at different pages to finally find how much the journal charges when you want to publish with them, and especially when you want to publish open access. So you may find a journal suitable overall, but then you find out after you read the website that the price is much more than what you can afford. So Country of Papers helps you to eliminate journals which may be suitable otherwise, but we simply cannot afford. In that case, you should probably give this tool a try and see if you are able to achieve a list of papers, that a list of journals that fits your pocket as well as your other requirements based on the manuscript. So the quality of journals is one of the things that worries people a lot, because mainly because predatory journals are so common now. Sorry. So Skymago Journal and Country Index (JCR). This is a list of journals, and what they have done is based on, I would like to call it quality, but it's mainly the number of citations. So they divide journals into four quartiles based on the number of citations from high quality journals. Now, Q1 to Q4 are the quartiles, and obviously, Q1 would be best quality, and Q4 would be lowest quality. Now, the thing is that when you see the way they calculate these ranks, you might find that the whole ranking system sort of sways or is leaning towards journals from the US and UK and Germany, because these journals are probably from well-known institutes, or maybe they have citations from well-known institutes, and journals of this kind accept papers from only premier institutes around the world. So Q1 and Q2 tend to be mainly populated with journals from these countries, and journals from developing countries like us can't really make it to Q1 Q2. So I would suggest that you don't ignore Q3 Q4 journals, especially if they're Indian or Asian. It doesn't mean that they're poor quality journals. If they suit your requirement, I would suggest that you publish in them. So journal impact factor. Now, journal impact factor is calculated as shown on the slide. It's usually assumed that if you submit your paper in say 2020, and it gets published in December 2020, you would probably have the most number of citations for that paper in the following 2 years. That is an assumption. So when they look at citation, or when they want to calculate the impact factor of a journal, they look at how many papers have been cited in a year and the articles published in the previous 2 years. And so impact factor is actually a ratio of how many citations the journal has got in a single year, divided by the number of articles that were published in the journal in the previous 2 years. because it's the same thing. You are most likely to be cited within 2 years of your publication. That is an assumption, but that is what impact factor is based on. So another thing is that when impact factor is used very often, because it's a single number, and it's probably easy to compare journals based on a single number. But there are a lot of things that go into that you should consider before you look at a journal's impact factor and take a decision, because you need to consider which subject area it is. If the subject is of an interdisciplinary type, then there are people from various disciplines, various backgrounds, who will be reading that journal and probably citing it in their own respective research. Even if it is not directly in the same field, it may be in a closely related field. So the thing is, if your article, or if the journal is of an interdisciplinary nature, the number of citations go up considerably. Circulation is another thing. If it's a print only journal, then it's bound to have lower readership. Basically, it has lower reach to its audience, as against an online journal or an open access journal. People are able to look at the paper, decide, okay, this is what I want, download it, read it entirely, and cite it. So circulation is another thing you need to consider. Readership, like I said, depends on who's reading your paper. People from different disciplines would mean a greater number of citations, greater possibility also. If the journal has been around for very many years, it's likely that they were the only players in the market uh, before other journals started on. So they would probably be building on a very high impact factor right from the beginning. So Nature is an example of that, or maybe even Royal Society of Chemistry publications. They've been around for 100 years or more, so they're likely to have really high impact factors. So these are the things that you need to consider before you take a decision based on if this journal has a high impact factor, it is good quality. It need not be like that, or even journals with low impact factors need not be bad quality journals or poor quality journals. You need to look at the other things. Are they predatory? I hope you have to check whether they are not predatory. You have also to check whether they fit your requirement, and only then take a decision whether that journal is suitable for you or not. Plagiarism, I'm sure this is something you've heard a lot whenever it comes to any intellectual property, any idea of any kind, not necessarily writing. Plagiarism is a malpractice, whether it is in science or in any other creative field. Plagiarism is considered a malpractice. So what exactly is plagiarism? It turns out that plagiarism is actually stealing, or it is a theft of intellectual property, ideas, text, images, whatever. And this is the general rule now all over the world. If your paper is found to be plagiarized, it is outright rejected. There is no way anybody is going to publish that, because every journal has its own plagiarism check software. Most journals use Authenticate, which has a really, really large database of or a collection of articles and documents against which your paper will be checked. So it is always better to make sure that your paper is as free of plagiarism as possible. There are techniques to do it. I'll be sharing some of those techniques with you also. So now different kinds of things, different kinds of stealing or different kinds of theft amounts to plagiarism. Let's see what that is. Global plagiarism is when you use somebody's entire text as your own. That is probably the worst kind of plagiarism, to take somebody's entire work and say it is yours. Paraphrasing plagiarism, this would be when you rewrite somebody else's ideas but do not cite them or do not put their reference. That amounts to stealing as well. So even that is considered a serious kind of plagiarism. Verbatim plagiarism. Verbatim would mean to copy as it is, so that is directly copying somebody's text without citation. Mosaic plagiarism. This would mean that you're mixing and matching, combining text from various different sources and calling it your own. because you are not citing any of the sources. So that is also considered a serious form of plagiarism. There is self plagiarism. Self plagiarism is when you use your own ideas or text or data from, say, one study and paste it as it is in another study without saying that it has already been used. So that is a moderately severe kind of plagiarism, because basically you are stealing your own ideas, but the fact is you are still cheating your reader, which is why it is considered a malpractice. Now, incorrect citation is when you do not provide all the necessary information to your reader about the citation or about the source from where you got your idea or whatever it is that you are presenting to your reader. Now, this usually happens by mistake because maybe you've not followed the correct format, or perhaps you've written in your reference list the volume number but not the issue number, or maybe you've not written the page numbers. So that is a very relatively minor form of plagiarism, and that can be easily corrected. So
Has Mukta lost the connection?
the way to avoid doing this rather is to make sure that you use
Ma'am, we can't hear you.
Ma'am, you're on mute.
yeah, yeah, I just unmuted it.
Yes, we also cannot see the presentation.
Yeah, okay. Now is it visible?
Not yet, ma'am.
Not yet. Okay, I'll have to share the screen again. Hmm. Now is it visible?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So the last thing you heard was about incorrect citation.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So I think we've covered this slide. I'm going to go to the next slide. Now, there are a lot of tools available for checking whether your manuscript has plagiarized text or not. I've listed some of them. This list is not mine. Scribber.com is a provides a plagiarism check service, and they have made a list of the 10 best plagiarism check services of 2020, and a lot of these you can see are free. Flag scan, for example, is quite commonly used now, as also copy leaks. Now there is a drawback actually of using free plagiarism. We'll come to that later. Free plagiarism check tools, I mean. So, okay, there are a lot of free and paid available tools online, and the difference between them, or the reason why some are paid and some are free, is because paid tools have a very large collection of plagiarism databases, in the sense that they have a very large collection of documents. Maybe they are paid papers from different websites, or maybe they are patent documents, or whatever they are. These are all the texts against which your paper will be compared. So if you have a larger database, obviously checking for plagiarism takes longer, but then that result is more reliable. So if after using a paid tool and after an extensive plagiarism check, if your result says okay, your paper is about 10% plagiarized, that is nominal, that is okay, and that is advisable to go further with, because when you have plagiarized text, it may be in your materials and methods section, where you can't possibly reword that data without changing the meaning, or you cannot reword that text at all if you want to deliver the same meaning across to the reader and ensure that they can do those experiments again and get the same results as you. So about 10 to 12% is allowable anyway. So usually paid tools are yeah, you have to pay quite a lot, but sometimes I think if you have a grant or something, then you can probably think of applying some of that money here, because it's definitely worth it. Getting your paper rejected because of plagiarism is definitely something you should avoid. So if you have access to funds which can allow you to look at paid plagiarism checker tools, I think you should go for it. Accordingly, yeah, free tools also are available, but then they have much smaller databases. So if a free plagiarism check software tells you that your data or your paper is free of plagiarism, take it with a pinch of salt, because it has checked a very limited number of documents, and perhaps what you have written does not match what they have checked. But there is absolutely no guarantee that it is checking documents from your subject area. It may be completely different. You may have written a paper on, maybe say, microbial fermentation, and that checks something like law and crime, and so there is obviously not going to be any match. So usually the larger the database, the more reliable your plagiarism detection result is. So of course there are advantages of using free plagiarism detection tools, mainly that you don't have to pay, but obviously the results are not reliable. So when you may still go ahead and use free plagiarism detection tools, but then you need to make sure that you're only checking small parts of your paper. Now the most likely places for plagiarism in a manuscript would be the introduction section or the discussion section, which are sections which you build on your literature review. So you have read papers, and you have read maybe somebody else's work, and then based on which you are designing your own experiment. So your introduction section definitely has a lot of data from other people's papers and other people's work. So that is a section that you should simply get checked as easily as possible, as quickly as possible, as soon as you've written it, so that you know immediately how much you need to change. The same would be with your discussion section, because after you've written that, and soon after you've written that, I would ask you to probably use a free plagiarism detection tool, and see if that is also, if a free tool is also catching plagiarism in your work, then you really need to think about rewriting. So the sooner you do it after you write your first draft, the more time you will have. So you could also use a free tool when you have to test a tool before buying it. That would be absolutely valid. Then when your text is entirely original and you're absolutely sure that there is no plagiarism in it whatsoever, then you may go ahead and use a free tool just to check. And also, if you know that this is the only type of checking for plagiarism that your paper is going to undergo, then you may go ahead and use the free tool. Now, there are, like I said, drawbacks of using free tools. They have smaller collections of documents for comparison, because of which they cannot detect all plagiarized text. You'll also find that they have a word limit. You can probably paste 1500 words at maximum, or maybe 500 words per trial. There is nothing more than that. So you can never upload an entire paper. You will have to do it in bits and parts. And the difficult thing about this is that you cannot trace what they are doing with your paper after you've pasted it. So they may store it, some sites don't, some sites do, and it's really problematic if they're selling your idea or your manuscript to somebody else. So that is one of the things that you should avoid, which is why people are not too much in favor of going for free plagiarism check tools. And obviously they have advertisements, and you'll find, please wait, this is in process, and there'll be an ad playing there. And you'll also find that a lot of features which you think are usable would be definitely disabled in the free version, and they would be functional in the paid version. And there is no money involved here, so then there won't be any customer support. So there is no way you can find out what happened to the pasted text that you sent there. Was it deleted? Was it sold? Was it? So it's best that you don't get into that. Of course, now if I tell you not to use a free tool, I must also tell you how to avoid plagiarism without using tools. So there are two simple rules. One thing is to, whenever you take an idea from somebody else's paper, you put down the reference in the text so that you know that this portion of the text is not my original work. It has been taken from so and so source, and I've cited the source, which is why it will not be considered plagiarism. Another thing you can do is paraphrase the text rather than copying it as it is, and also provide citations. So it is like saying that I have borrowed this person's idea and here is my version of it. So, paraphrasing, a lot of people wonder what paraphrasing is. So, paraphrasing is like rewording or rephrasing the text, but the most important thing is that you should not alter the meaning. So, the meaning has to remain the same, although the paragraph may look a little different or may sound different, but essentially it has to tell you the same thing as the original text. So, Scribber, being a plagiarism detection platform, also tells you how to paraphrase text, and some of their points were really good. So, I've decided to share them with you. You can read the text repeatedly until you understand the meaning completely. This is a very important thing because every time you read the text, you will probably see a new part of the meaning unfold to you. So, until you are sure that you have read it completely and understood it completely, you need to keep reading through it. Then you need to note down the main ideas or the main points in the text so that you can rephrase it in your own sequence, in your own way, in your own words. Then you compose your version of the text without looking at the original. That expects you to probably, do it from memory, maybe completely close the original text out of your mind, perhaps shut the journal or whatever it is you're reading from. But the important thing is to synthesize your own idea based on the original text that you read. You need not memorize the text, but you have to understand it well in order to synthesize your version of it. And then you modify the parts that seem very similar to the original text, and that would probably mean you need to use similar meaning words or synonyms, or then rearrange it a little bit so that it doesn't look exactly the same although it says the same thing. And finally, you must cite the source. Scribber has also shared some tips about how to paraphrase text. So they say you start your text from a different point from the original. So when you've noted down the points that are, the main points of the text, then instead of going with point number one being the first sentence, you could make point number three the first sentence and then rearrange from there on. Use synonyms. Synonyms are words with similar meanings. So, for example, I used to work with wastewater, so I may be using the word wastewater in the original text, and if I have to rewrite it, I may say effluent, perhaps. So that makes the whole thing look different. And even when journals to which I submit run their authenticate software, because the words are different, it will not be considered under, it will not come under the similarity index that they have, so because the words are different. Then you can alter sentence structure. Here is where active passive voice becomes a very helpful tool. If you've studied it in uh, English grammar in school, you'll be using it now. And instead of having long sentences, you may break up long sentences into small parts so that every part has its own information. That way, the length of the passage also changes, and you may be able to, elaborate on the ideas that the original text has sort of just given you in a gist. So here is an example. Now this is one of the a passage from one of my papers. I was writing on aluminium hyperaccumulation in a certain plant. So if you notice, I'm just going to read this out to you. The roles of various elements as macronutrients and micronutrients in plant growth are well established. However, thus far, no role in plant growth has been attributed to aluminium in its various ionic states, including Al3+. Although Al is one of the most abundant metals in the Earth's crust, several studies have reported toxicity in plants caused by aluminium 3 plus at micromolar concentrations. Despite its ubiquitous occurrence, plants have not been reported to use aluminium for growth, probably because biological systems are not designed to use free trivalent cations like aluminium 3 plus. However, they can use Fe and CO, which can change their valency under conditions prevailing in biological systems. Now this is the original text, and when I looked at it, I thought there were some parts that were repetitive, and that they could have probably been combined into the same sentence or then probably done away with entirely. So I tried to modify this. I'll show you the modified version or the paraphrased version. So this is the paraphrased version. I have started from a different point. If you notice, aluminium is a major component of the Earth's crust. However, it has not been reported to contribute to plant growth either as a macronutrient or a micronutrient in any of its ionic states. Unlike Al3+, which is a free trivalent cation, cations like Fe and CO that change their valency under metabolic conditions are more compatible with biological systems. Furthermore, studies have shown that even micromolar concentrations can cause aluminium toxicity in plants. Reference here. So the idea is to show you that even after you restructured and rewritten the text, you still need to cite the source so that it doesn't amount to plagiarism. Now, if you notice, I started this paraphrased version from a different point from the original. I've also shortened the length and done away with repetitive text, which was talking about aluminium being ubiquitously present and the major component of the Earth's crust and stuff. And also, I have used biological systems here, no, metabolic conditions instead of conditions prevailing in biological systems. So in that way you can tweak your knowledge of maybe synonyms in science, and you use it so that the text essentially says the same thing without sounding the same or looking the same, even in terms of length. So this is what I had to share with you today. Thank you for listening. I think we can probably now try and answer I can try and answer your questions if you have any.
Ma'am, there's a question from Jannavi Patil. That
Okay.
what's the difference between global and verbatim plagiarism?
Okay. If we go back to the slide, you can still see the presentation, right?
Yes,
Hello.
ma'am.
Okay. So global plagiarism is when you are to take. It's like saying that your lab mate left his notepad on his table and went home, and then you picked it up the same day and said, oh, he's not here, so I can use his entire paper as my own. That would be global plagiarism. And verbatim plagiarism is when you directly copy parts of text. So it's about the whole and the part. So global is about taking an entire paper or an entire maybe, usually it is an original idea, so it is a paper, research paper, like a research article and not a review article that is usually stolen. But yeah, global would be to pick up somebody's entire work and call it your own. Verbatim would be copying exactly the same but in parts. Does that answer your question?
Yes, ma'am. She's saying you have answered the question really nicely.
Thank you.
Ma'am, there's a question from Biswajit Saha.
Okay.
He's asking that what is H indexing and how is it important?
H indexing, I believe, I mean, I may not be able to answer that entirely right now, but it is more, it seems to be more related to citations than, than to maybe the quality of your work. It is more likely that if you are cited more often, you have a higher H index. This is how I interpret it. It may be wrong, but I can see if I can go back to it and probably share the answer with the coordinator so that they can pass it on to Biswajit.
Yes, ma'am. Sure. Then there is one more question from Dipali. She's asking there are if there are any disadvantages of different tools of plagiarisms.
Disadvantages, you would mean a disadvantage of using it?
Yes, I think so.
Okay. So, one thing is, because plagiarism tools are essentially software, they can't really tell the difference between, the kind of text that you would have to use as it is, so that, like in your materials and methods, or maybe the definition of something, it will be caught as copied text or something simply because it is exactly the same. So, the disadvantage would be that a lot of times the areas in your text which are marked as similar or copied may be copied because they cannot be put in any other way. So, you may have to, look at the result and analyze how many parts are really worth your looking into to reword. And so that would probably be the only disadvantage of using plagiarism software, plagiarism detection software. It's just that they don't know the difference between what has to be copied and what need not be copied. Does that answer your question?
Yes, ma'am. The next question is from Jeel. That are there any free plagiarism checker sites where your manuscript won't be possibly stolen or sold?
The It cannot be guaranteed, so it's always better to put only parts of your of your manuscript. So I would suggest that if you feel that a free site may select parts of your manuscript and sell it off to somebody, I would suggest that you only put introduction and maybe discussion parts in the plagiarism check window. So you don't actually put any of your materials and results there, so that nothing can be easily stolen or your idea is safe. Because introduction will still have, text from somebody else's paper, because it is a literature review, so it is safer to upload parts of your text if you are in doubt. Don't ever upload your full paper if you are in doubt. Does that answer your question?
Yes, ma'am.
Ma'am, there's one more question from Kusum.
Okay.
What is the right score for match?
Oh, it's relative. As in, the way I would look at it, maybe you have a score, as say you have a score of 0.5, and that is the highest score among those that are given to you. So I would say you would have to go with the highest score. Then it's not like what is a right score for match. It's just whichever one is the highest at that point is the one you should take, if it matches your other requirements, of course, publication charges being the primary deterrent in that case. I
Okay,
hope that
understood.
answers your question.
Yes, ma'am. There is one more question from Dipali. She's asking on what basis are these types of plagiarism are classified, which have been put up here in the slide.
um, Now there are a couple of software that are probably the pioneers in this, Authenticate being one of them and Turnitin being the other. Now these are mainly universities in the US were using it to see if uh, students are copying homework from each other, besides not homework as in assignments, So I think that is how they used, I mean, that is how they coined these terms, and that's how they decided that these are the 6 major types into which probably copying somebody else's work falls into, or your own for that matter. So it's mainly because they were used to check assignments in the US. I think that's how these terms have come about. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, ma'am. I think we are done with the questions.
Okay.
Okay. Yes, ma'am. Dipali is saying thank you so much.
Okay. And has Atmaram joined today? Because he had a question yesterday based on semantics and semiotics. Is he there today?
Yes, ma'am. He is there.
Okay,
Atmaram, you may ask.
so if I remember your question correctly, Atmaram, was it balance? How do I balance semantics and semiotics in my manuscript? Was that the question? Can you please confirm? Mhm. Perhaps I can proceed to answer it.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So, based on his question, now I wasn't quite sure yesterday what he meant directly by semantics and semiotics, but looking back now and looking at some of the reference material, I understand his question as how do I balance figures and text in my paper? Is this is what I understand his question may be in simpler terms. So, I think the figures are essential to help a reader understand exactly what you are saying, but they are most necessary in the results section. So, I think if you have figures, you should probably use them mainly in the results section. And you can prefer graphs over tables when you have to represent numerical data, because it becomes much easier to see, to look at a bar graph and understand the general trend of maybe your results, rather than to read a table. And if you want to represent a protocol, now if you are doing clinical studies or maybe systematic reviews where you need to show your protocol in the form of a flow chart, then you should do it and refrain from explaining that protocol again in text. Basically, I would suggest that if you have a word count limit and you cannot possibly exceed that limit, then you should use a flowchart in those cases. That way, you make it easier for the reader and you save on your words, which you can use later in the paper for maybe elaborating in your discussion section or something. This is how I would think you should, but you would look mainly at the journal guidelines to see if they have a maximum number of allowable figures or something, because you should try not to exceed that. If they say a maximum of 12 figures is allowed with every paper, then you should stay within that limit. 10 would be safe in my opinion. So I hope this has answered his question. I don't know if he can confirm that, it will be really good.
Ma'am, there is one last question from Rani. She's
Okay.
asking if I write something
Mm-hmm.
somebody else has already written,
Okay.
but she didn't know that they have already written it. So is it still
Okay.
considered as plagiarism?
No, that would see. If you, I don't know. Now this is going back to science history, but if you thought about the word nylon, do you know why it's called nylon? Because somebody in New York,
New
NY,
York
and
and
somebody in
London.
London came up with the same formula for nylon at the same time, and they didn't know each other. But that's the way science works. Now it's not considered plagiarism in that sense. So if you don't know about somebody else having written it, in all likelihood you will not have written it in the exact same words, so it will not be considered plagiarism. and this is this is an error, or this, it's not an error, but it is something that science has to cut leeway for, because yes, two great minds can think alike, so it will happen, it will happen with numerous people. So it's not considered plagiarism, because if you have simultaneously had the same idea, chances are high that you would not have written them down in the same way, published them in the same style. You know, there are things which will call it plagiar, make it appear like plagiarism, and they are to do with publishing, and they're highly unlikely to be exactly the same. This is what I think. Does that answer your question, Rani? Okay, good.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, that's nice to know. Okay.
I'll just propose a formal vote of thanks on this
Okay.
occasion.
Okay.
It is my privilege to have been asked to propose a vote of thanks on this occasion on behalf of KC College and the Department of Biotechnology. It is my honor to express our deep sense of appreciation to Dr. Mugdha Ambedkar Kamath for gracing this occasion. Thank you for guiding us so wonderfully on the publication of research paper and the demonstration of various tools. We are really enlightened with your knowledge and presence. I would like to express profound gratitude to our dynamic principal, Dr. Hemlata Bagla, Head Nuclear Radiochemistry Department and Senior Dean of Science and Technology, HSNC University, Mumbai, and our Star Status Coordinator, Dr. Sagrika Damle, for always supporting and encouraging us. I would also thank our Vice Principals, Dr. Samarjit Padi, Dr. Shalini Sinha, Dr. Tejashri Shanbag, for their constant support and encouragement. Finally, I would take this opportunity to place on record our hearty thanks to the participants for making this workshop a success. Last but not the least, the technical team for their support. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Mukta,
Thank
for
you
that
so much.
wonderful session, two-day workshop. I request all the participants to please fill up the feedback where the link is there in the chat box. And please fill it up properly, because that will be the source from which we will take your names for certificates. Thank you.
And I'd like to thank you all for this opportunity, because it was really amazing to talk to everybody, though I can't see too many people, and that is a drawback perhaps of the online format, but it was really great to be here. So thanks to you all for this opportunity. Thank you.
Yeah, I think we are done. Prachi, shall we end the meeting?
Ma'am, we'll just wait for 5 minutes till they fill in
For
the
the feedback.
Yes, ma'am. Then we can.
All right.